Hello and welcome to Fatima Today. This show is produced by the World Apostolate of Fatima USA, Our Lady's Blue Army, and brings topics to you, our viewers, related to the events in the world today. We live in tumultuous times when logic seems to have disappeared and uncertainty hangs over us. Our hope on these programs is to address the issues of the day and find solutions through adherence to the laws of God, especially through the message of Fatima. We ask that you subscribe to this podcast. Many people have worked to bring the Fatima message to the world. The co-founders of this apostolate, John Hafford and Monsignor Colgan, built a network both in the United States and abroad. In Fatima, they established Domus Pachas Hotel and Retreat Center and established a network of devotees to this message. Carlos Evaristo is an individual who has been connected with our apostolate for many years, an author and Portuguese television personality. Carlos spent time and interviewed Sister Lucia. His knowledge of Fatima is extensive. Welcome, Carlos.
Welcome. Hello, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here today. And, of course, we've worked together, known each other for many years. And the work of, the Fatima message, everybody knows the Fatima, everybody now is a Fatima expert. I mean, all you got to do is look on the, I think it really built up to the centennial. And then you couple it with a pandemic a couple years later and this idea that the world is coming to an end. And I think everybody now loves the prophecies of Fatima. I think it's the things we've been talking about for 105 years, at least our apostolate now for 75 years. You're there in Fatima. We're here. Of course, I'm back and forth quite often, but not so much in the last couple of years due to the pandemic. But I don't know. I've seen some things here that are certainly maybe we are living some of the prophecies of Fatima. I have an attitude about prophecy that it's nothing more than a warning to us that we better get back on track with certain things. Others believe that prophecy is etched in stone and must move forward no matter what. I just get your take a little bit on the message of Fatima, how you view it, of course, in your position, and your general feeling about where the world is today in light of the Fatima message.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. And I have to say that, first of all, the Fatima message, in the words of Sister Lucia, is really a message that is similar to the message of the angels at the birth of Christ in Bethlehem. Sister Lucia told me that the angels at Bethlehem did not say, peace on earth to all mankind. The angels said, peace on earth to men of goodwill, knowing fully well that people who are not of goodwill are never going to be at peace with anyone, not even with themselves. So the Fatima message has to begin with that message of the angels, Sister Lucia told me, and people have to be receptive to being instruments of peace, because the Fatima message is a message of peace. It's actually more than that, because it's a heavenly reply to a papal request for peace. Pope Benedict XV, in the deadlock of World War I, decided that the war had come to a standstill where there was nothing going on but the slaughter of all of the youth of Europe and the world. And he had to do something, and that was to implore directly heaven's intervention. And so he inserted in the Litany of Loreto, that honors Our Lady with the various titles, for the first time, Queen of Peace, pray for us. And a few days later, a week later, Our Lady appears in Fatima with a message of peace, with the means for the Pope to obtain peace, not only a spiritual peace, but also a physical peace, and to avoid further conflicts such as war if these requests are heeded. And so we see here that Fatima the miracle of the sun in Fatima, people have said it is the greatest miracle since the resurrection. Well, the prophecy of Fatima and the message of Fatima is the direct reply from heaven to a papal request for peace. The Pope wanted the means to obtain peace, and Our Lady gave him the means to obtain peace. So the message in that sense has to be understood as pontifical in a sense that it was destined for the Pope. When we spoke to Sister Lucia about sharing the secret with us or something concerning the secret, she said she couldn't speak about that because it was for the Pope. And so the message is it's twofold, because the responsibility of the Pope carrying out his part of the mission depends on the support that he gets from us, from the world. And so it's a twofold request and a twofold mission to obtain peace. The Pope had to consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, but the people had to support the Pope with prayers and with sacrifices and with the first Saturdays. Now, as human beings, we often fail in our mission. The plan is usually there, but you always see, especially in construction, you always have unforeseen expenses that go on the bill and inflate the original estimate of the construction, and always delays. And that's because we think ourselves sometimes experts at things that we really aren't, and decide, well, maybe we should question this or maybe we should question that. So that delayed the implementation of this peace plan from heaven that would have prevented a cyclical war, which was World War II. So in fact, the delay in the Pope replying made it also completely impossible on a later at a later time to carry out the consecration of Russia as was requested. Now, if we look at the message of Fatima, and the worst danger to any religion or to any prophecy are fanatics. Fanatics are really the greatest danger to any religion or any prophecy or any religious organization, because they take things out of context, they blow things out of proportion, and they really cause confusion. And
well, thus it delegitimizes, because people then look at the sensational aspect, they look at the lack of credibility in many cases of the individuals, and then the whole message unfortunately gets put out. Yeah.
And I, like St. Paul, entered into the Fatima picture on a wrong path. I'm from a Portuguese family, and so I speak fluent Portuguese, and we always anything that was Fatima related in Canada, we always liked to be part of. And there was a television show on television, and Fatima show on television, and I was brought up to believe that priests were another Christ, and so they were holy and unable to commit any wrongful doing or any lies or so. I answered a message on the television show, and ended up working as the pilgrimage director for one of the apostolates that were run by Father Nicholas Runner. Needless to say that I later found out, when we went to see Sister Lucia during a bishop's conference that he had organized here in Fatima, that his views were entirely different and opposed to not only the church's views, but also the Pope's and Sister Lucia's. But the problem that we have is when we don't speak to the messenger and then so-called experts or self-proclaimed experts start to interpret the message themselves. And so in that, I was, in fact, like many people, misled because I had believed that certain aspects of the prophecy that were written in books, not only by Father Gruner, but other authors before him. I can say that, and Sister Lucia said that Father Gruner may have based his opinions on erroneous interpretations that were out there, but that he should have the humility to accept that he was wrong. But in any case, the idea here was we met with Sister Lucia on 2 occasions. Well, on the second occasion, it was all video recorded, and we were absolutely amazed that as North Americans, myself, we were completely wrong in what we had been spreading in certain aspects of the prophecy, believing them to be written in stone, like you said, and literal and unchangeable and interpreted in a certain way. And that shocked me greatly because I always thought that, for example, the conversion of Russia would be conversion to Catholicism. And Sister Lucia told us, no, it's a conversion from a path of militant atheism to a path of normality where a country allows for the religious freedom and the free will of man to reign, because God gave man free will to choose between good and evil. And if you remove God from the equation, then nobody has the choice because you're born atheist into an atheist system and the whole thing, it's spiritually dead. So the annihilation of nations, which I believe was physical, like many authors had said, is not. It has nothing to do with the physical. It's the annihilation of nations from a religious cultural point of view, meaning that all of the nations where atheist Soviet teachings had implemented completely eradicated religion, completely eradicated the concept of God, so that the people who were born into the system were already spiritually dead, because there was no way for them to have sacraments, to have knowledge of God, to have knowledge of anything. So to Sister Lucia, this is far worse than somebody being in a country and a bomb is dropped on them and they die in a state of grace. They're martyrs to go to heaven. But here you're born into a system where the greatest sin is being committed. And to Sister Lucia, the greatest sin is atheism, because it's the greatest evil. It denies God his very existence, the greatest insult you can give. And it allows for people not to have a conscience, not to have any sense of morality, because then you can practice abortion and any other heinous crimes, because the atheist system allows for that. And so when Our Lady appeared in 1917, she said that the Pope would have to consecrate Russia. I will come back to request the consecration of Russia, she said. It was not to be done in 1917. I found out from Sister Lucia it was to be done in 1929, because at that time the Pope was preparing the encyclica Divini Redentores, which denounced the errors of communism. And all he had to do was add a few words of consecration to that text and have each bishop in his own country, in his own diocese, read out this text. And once they did that, the consecration would be done, and the spread of communism, which would then develop through the creation of the Soviet Union, which was a machine through the Politburo that pumped atheism into the countries they took over, would have been avoided. World War II would have been avoided. And we know that God provided through divine providence that the same day that Sister Lucia received the mighty vision of Tui and the request, where Our Lady says the time has come to request that the Pope make the consecration of Russia, The apostolic nuncio was actually in the convent. I found out he was preaching a retreat in the convent. And so with permission from her confessor and her superior, she would have communicated, and she did, that message to the nuncio, who by the end of the week would have been in Rome meeting with the Pope. So the Pope would have knowledge firsthand of this request within the end of the week, or a week and a half after the actual vision that requested the consecration. The time had come because he was preparing this document. Well, he chose to ignore this, delay it, perhaps consult other people regarding it. And that's really what made so that later the consecration could not be done in that way and in those words. Russia was no longer Russia. It became the Soviet Union. So you can't consecrate Russia because it doesn't exist anymore. Now you have the Soviet Union. And God was aware of this. And when Christ appears to Sister Lucia in the convent and says, make it known to my ministers that given that they follow the example of the King of France, like him, they will fall into misfortune. The King of France, of course, was deemed to be a sacred co-worker of the Sacred Heart in bringing about the consecration of France to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, to prevent the French Revolution and the spread of atheism that happened afterwards that affected all the countries of Europe and the world. And so this is what happened with France, because the king was late in consecrating. Some say he actually did consecrate the France in the cell just before he was going to be executed. But it did not serve its purpose to prevent these evils from happening. And likewise, because the Pope delayed, perhaps because he wanted to consult other experts to see if this was correct, or politicians, it also developed to this idea of the Soviet Union, and it made it impossible. So later, when Christ reveals to Alexandrina of Balazar, Portuguese mystic who is blessed, he made it known that the consecration of the world would now have to be made to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, because the errors that were contained in Russia of atheism had now spread. And
now,
so
what year was this with Blessed Alexandrina? What year was that revelation to her?
She was contemporary to Sister Lucia, and she was having visions in the 1930s and 1940s. And the request that reached Pius XII, in fact, the Bishop of Fatima also delayed in implementing the first Saturdays, which were essential as a prayer support for the Pope. And this is a very holy man, Don José Alves Correia da Silva. And when I read the manuscripts and the letters, the Monsignor who was overseeing the study of all of these documents that were at the shrine, and 20 volumes have been published, we looked at each other and he says, I know what you're thinking. Had Don José not delayed, we would not have had World War II. And that's the impression we get. If he had immediately sent this request, but we know that the request, I now know that the request also went to the Pope via the Apostolic Nuncio, who was at the convent at the time. So the Pope got the message. But we have to understand, we're human beings. A Pope is also a head of state. There's diplomacy involved. It might have aggravated the Bolsheviks worse, and they may have committed slaughter of Christians in Russia. We don't know what was in the Pope's mind, but the fact is he delayed. But our Lord knew this, because the message of Fatima, the prophecy, is straightforward. It says, I will come back to request the consecration of Russia. The Pope will consecrate Russia to me, but it will be too late. In the Portuguese wording of too late, it simply means, it's too late. It just can't be done anymore. It's of no use for that particular purpose. So when the Pope, Pius XII, makes this veiled consecration of the nations that have most need, etc. He did it on his own as an ecclesiastical pronouncement on the 31st of October. And, the World War II was already, bursting. And so it may have shortened the war, but it sure as did not prevent the spread of communism, because that was 1929. And after 1929, it just wouldn't work. So the other thing is, he didn't tell the other bishops to participate in union with the bishops. So they didn't know he was going to do it. They couldn't add their own desire for consecration of the world. And so in effect, it didn't work. Sister Lucia says that Paul VI, at the close of Vatican II Council, makes in his words the consecration to Our Lady. But again, the bishops were all assembled there, but they didn't know about it. They didn't know that he was doing this. And so again, it didn't work. So it wasn't until Pope John Paul II carries out the consecration the second time, because we know that the message says the Pope will consecrate Russia, but it'll be too late. Russia will spread its errors. The good will be martyred. The Pope will have much to suffer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But in the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. The Pope will consecrate Russia to me, and a period of peace will be given to the world. So if you look at the straightforward message, in the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. So the triumph of the Immaculate Heart, according to Sister Lucia, began the day the Pope was shot. And she deviated the bullet, which was destined to shoot him right through the heart. And this is a marksman. This is a professional assassin and killer. And he later said, I mean, I aimed I am a marksman.
I don't miss.
I don't miss. I am a hitman. I mean, I don't miss. And so the fact that he did not kill the Pope is a miracle in itself. And the Pope always said that he owed that to Our Lady's intervention, her maternal hand that deviated the bullet, diffracted the bullet. And so he woke up to Fatima. But it was Our Lady through her triumph, the triumph of the Immaculate Heart, that awoke him to Fatima. And he became a Fatima Pope. I mean, he said that his pontificate should have ended that day. And everything else he lived, every day he lived after that was a gift from God. It was extra, right? So we see how the prophecy, because later the third part of the secret, which was then revealed in the year 2000, shows this man dressed in white, who was the Pope, walking through a half-ruined city. The half-ruined city is the city of God. St. Augustine is the church. And so there's martyrs falling to the right, to the left, and these are the martyrs of the 20th century. And when he reaches the mount where there's a cross, that symbolizes the new millennium. And just before he reaches there, he falls, having been shot with arrows and bullets. Arrows is a medieval symbology of words, because before you had cartoons with bubbles like Snoopy and Charlie Brown, you depicted people in paintings and in cartoons with arrows coming out of their mouth, shooting out of their mouth, and you wrote the words on them. So the papacy during the 20th century suffered more verbal abuses than in all of the centuries. There were more people killed during World War II and during the 20th century. And so the Pope is shot with arrows and bullets and falls dead. So that is not etched in stone, because he was not killed. He was not killed. He was saved by Our Lady. And if you look at the beginning of this secret, it says, I saw an angel with a flaming sword about to ignite the earth. And the rays from the Sacred Heart of the Immaculate Heart of Mary prevented this sword from striking. And Sister Lucia told us that the consecration that the Pope then carried out after consulting Sister Lucia to find out what was wrong, why the first consecration he made wasn't proper. And she said, you have to have every bishop participate in it. And it doesn't mean every single bishop. If there's a bishop who didn't want to participate, or he wasn't able to, or whatever, it doesn't make the consecration null and void. It's the symbolism of the unity with the Pope, the unity of the people with their pastor and then the Pope. And so in this sense, the Pope carried out the consecration in according to what was to be done at that specific point of the prophecy, after the consecration had failed, after it was too late, and after the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary began. So the first day of the triumph is the day that the Pope is shot, according to Sister Lucia.
Interesting.
And then,
You know, there is a, to jump in just a moment, the, I know I had a conversation once with the late Dmitry Kavazov. Dmitry was the, he, of course, he was very instrumental in bringing the icon of Kazan, which the Blue Army possessed for many years, and went to the Vatican to the chapel of St. Pope John Paul II. He was instrumental. I was there in Russia at his home actually for dinner, and we were, and he was Russian Orthodox, right. And but he was very open on the idea of the Fatima message, and he said that without all of the Orthodox bishops, it would never still be complete, because they were still valid bishops, even though, and my understanding is, I think the invitation did go out even to the Orthodox bishops throughout the world to join in with the consecration. I don't know that for a fact, perhaps you do, but he said without that, it was still going to be incomplete. Good words. I mean,
we know that it was very important that bishops, even within Russia, also participate. Bishop Kondrashevich was one of them.
Yes, that's right.
The other bishop that was there and claims to have done it right in the Kremlin, there from his hotel across from the Kremlin, was Bishop Pavlov Nilitsa. He claimed he even went to Russia and on behalf of those bishops that couldn't, he did the consecration there. Now, what Sister Lucia said, that when I objected and said, well, there are people who say if all the bishops didn't participate, then it's invalid. She said, no, the majority of the bishops did, and heaven accepted it. Our Lady and the magnanimous of God, so magnanimous that even though our offerings sometimes are poor and incomplete, he accepts them as they are, cheap and weak as they may seem, and incomplete. Yeah. And so what Sister Lucia said is, it was not what was expected. It was expected in 1929, but Our Lady accepted it.
Well, I think that goes to the point that there are degrees of benefit. Okay, for example, okay, on August 19th, Our Lady appeared to the children at Volynios, because they were kept from obviously being at the apparition site on the 13th, and she did say there that because of the actions of the administrator and others, that the miracle in October would be diminished.
Right. Okay. The war would have ended that day. The war would have ended that day of the apparition.
Okay, so there you go. So the point is that there are degrees of advantage, degrees of effect that happen, and that's when we refer to the consecration made by Pope Pius XII, that it was incomplete, but it did shorten World War II. So it did have an effect. So, and certainly what happened after the 1984 consecration cannot be ignored.
No.
I mean, the work of St. Pope John Paul II, and in union with people like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, other political leaders, and of course, this couple of weeks ago with the death of Mikhail Gorbachev, I heard all this praise of Gorbachev, and I think he does deserve some credit. But they made it sound like he brought down the Soviet Union. Well, I think Our Lady did that. He was open to it, though. Pardon?
Nonetheless, Sister Lucia told us something that became very controversial. She said in our interview, and that man in Russia, unbeknownst to himself, was an instrument of God in the conversion process. And I said, what man, Gorbachev? And she said, yes. And he knelt at the feet of the Holy Father and asked pardon for all of the crimes he had committed, himself and his communist system.
There you go.
Now, I'd never heard this. None of us
I have not, no.
Heard. But later on, Father Messias Coelho, who was he was the first Portuguese chaplain of the Portuguese Blue Army, and who was a great historian, had a Fatima newspaper, the longest running Fatima newspaper. He went to his eternal reward a few years ago. but he was the first chaplain of the Blue Army in the Domus Pacis. And Father Messias Coelho said that he had gone there with a group of bishops before we had gone there in 1992. And he had heard from Sister Lucia to these bishops, one of them being Bishop Nilitsa, that Gorbachev had had this role, prophetic role, as an instrument of God in the conversion process. And he theorized that one of two things: either the Pope, in speaking to Sister Lucia at Fatima when he visited, assured her that Gorbachev had helped with the end of the Soviet Union, and either something was lost in translation because either he didn't speak very good Portuguese or she didn't understand very well. And so maybe, or he meant this symbolically, that by going to the Soviet Union, to the Vatican, this leader of the Soviet Union was in fact, in a way, kneeling before the Catholic Church. So there is another theory that Father Messias wrote about and told me, and he believed that it perhaps related to a certain fact that some people say Gorbachev was the head of the Bulgarian KGB, and that it was the Bulgarian KGB office that contracted Mohammed Ali Akka to shoot the Pope, to assassinate the Pope, because he was a threat to communism, because he had come from a Soviet bloc country, Poland. And that when the Italian government investigated the assassination attempt, they came to the conclusion that the person who had ordered it was now the president of the USSR. And so how do you accuse the USSR and the president and not provoke perhaps a third world war?
Yeah.
And so he theorized that the president of Italy had given the file on the investigation to the Pope and said, we can't go any further with this because this is where it ends. And that when Gorbachev and his wife visited the Vatican for the first time, that the Pope may have said to him, by the way, I forgive you for ordering the attempt on my life. And it may have moved him in such a way that he may say, whoa, how does he know this? Is it prophetic?
How do we know? But yeah, that's a good point. You know,
so one of the two things, either it was symbolic that John Paul II meant that Gorbachev knelt at his feet. It was symbolic of the Soviet Union kneeling before the church, or that it was actually a real thing that happened, but we will never know. But the fact is, Sister Lucia confirmed to us after the interview we published went out and it created controversy, she clarified that it was Pope John Paul II that told her this. So whether, again, if it was something lost in translation, if it was symbolic, or if it really happened, we don't know. But Gorbachev did have a role. And just like the administrator, like you mentioned in the August apparition, Our Lady said she would appear every month from May to October, and she did. She was there. And she said later on when she appeared at Vilnius, she said, given that these men took you to the village, which was Orem, you did not see this, this, and this. You did not see Our Lady with the heart, with the thorns removed, and an arch of flowers and two angels at her side. You didn't see this. You didn't see that. This was going to happen, and it didn't happen. You know, the war would have ended that day, and it didn't. The miracle of October is diminished. Maybe it could have been seen everywhere in the world and converted everybody.
Yeah.
But because of that one man's action, of taking the children, it moved history. It changed prophecy. And that's how much responsibility we have, especially in the Fatima message and apostolate, in being careful with what we say, because we can gravely influence people in a way and on a path that's completely opposite to what we're supposed to be on, just by expressing our opinions that may be erroneous. And
nothing is more dangerous. Nothing's more dangerous than being designated as an expert.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's true, you know, and I mean, you know, yeah, I'm asked to speak a lot. Of course, you do, and you know what that's like. But Carlos, we're gonna have to end here now because of the time constraints. But I'd like to maybe continue on with the part two of this in the very near future. Okay, we can follow up, and I'd like to talk then more about now. Okay, we know where we're at today. Where are we
Right.
going? What do we do? Okay, because that's really what I mean. To me, that's the message and the mission of this apostolate is to take it forward now and still fulfill the message of Fatima because it is there to be fulfilled. The promise is it will be fulfilled. We know that it's going to be beyond us, obviously. What we do are as we do as tools of Our Lady. But I do believe that's really how we all have to take this. Thank you so much for being here. I really would like to follow up with the part two where we can talk about where we go today to fulfill this message, both here and of course what you're doing in Portugal. And let's make this. We'll do this soon again. Okay, I do appreciate it. So thank you everyone for listening today. Fatima Today. This is our podcast. We ask that you subscribe. Thank you and God bless you.